Uh, well, welcome to the Tilted Roll podcast.
Hello.
One of my favorite ways I think we've ever opened a show. Today is a thought-provoking topic, one that could lead you into a state of
Exactly. Hi, I'm Francisco.
I am Marshall, and we are your podcast masters. I need to not lean down, otherwise I hide behind the entirety of my laptop.
I would love the entire podcast for you just to have your eyes above the laptop.
All right, so today we are talking about homebrew. Actually, if I'll lean back, so at least then it works. All right, so homebrew.
Oh, yeah.
It's a wide-reaching topic that can go really good and really bad. You can go really subtle, barely changing certain things, to just having an entire campaign that's based on whether or not if the fantasy setting of Dungeons and Dragons was able to consistently travel into the year 1920.
Which is always fun. It's always a fun concept to explore that.
Yes, although that specific example is actually held by one of our good friends, John, who runs an amazing campaign which has that exact concept.
We call it the Thursday campaign. Yeah.
Well, yes, and we don't get to talk about it too much on the podcast as a good reference because it's just littered with homebrew. But conceptually, it makes sense. The setting makes sense for it.
Right.
But we will actually talk about that a little bit more later. I'm going to actually now sit up properly. The meme is, I think, dead by this point. But first, I think we should just talk about an overview.
Yeah.
What is homebrew and how it works?
Well, what is homebrew in your words, Marshall?
I look at it as anything that is changed from the base game in order to... I guess I should say pretty much that is just anything that has changed from any of the base rule sets that is placed within the official books.
Okay. Same.
Yeah, it's a very basic definition.
Yeah. He essentially covers it all. Layman's terms is just if you see something that the books don't have, you just make it. That's the core belief of homebrew in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many places where you can find material for homebrew because a lot of people do it. Surprise, surprise. But
including us.
Yeah, exactly. Many campaigns are actually just homebrew campaigns, and where it's the setting that people make, and then you live in it.
So let's bring that up. I think that's a great place to start then.
Yes.
I think a great place to start then is the homebrew campaign, because I think that's the first place that most people go to. And I'm going to change my levels here in the middle of it. This is always really a good motif. But essentially, yeah, like I think most people start with a campaign. Mm-hmm. Like most people when they're thinking of homebrew, it's because they just want to tell their own story. And they don't want to tell one of the pre-written adventures that exist. Because obviously Wizards, we've talked about, makes a number of them.
Yes, they do.
But people like us, especially in our shows that we are running, especially Shadows of the Empire, very obviously not based on any type of adventure. It is completely a story that I have written for the players and audience.
Mm-hmm. That you spend countless nights not sleeping, just writing.
I have never gone that deep yet. Not for that one.
I'm already at that level. Okay.
But we may very well get there come future campaigns that are being prepped for.
Spoilers.
Well, anyway, so... But yes, so the basis of that's always I think the first place people go with homebrew.
Mm-hmm. But many people, especially for me, when I started DMing and I wanted to run a campaign that wasn't set in any of the core books or the settings that they had, like Forgotten Realms, Eberron, all that fun jazz, I found myself asking, where do I start when making these things? Like, how do I create a world in a way? And you would think it's easy. You'd just be like, slap a name onto a planet looking similar like Earth, be like, yeah, I'm done. But in reality, there's like so many things that go into it, and it's fun. It's so much fun coming up with everything. But it's really easy to get distracted with another thing that won't be relevant for like 50 sessions in.
Yeah, world building is one of those things where like you can instantly find yourself just being totally entranced in like this idea and concept of like this cool stuff you want to do, and it's not at all relevant to what you're about to do. Mm-hmm. So that's why, like, one of the things we were going to get into is kind of our tips on creating a homebrew world and campaign, and kind of, I guess, the resistance to the allure of knowing where everything's going to be going for the entirety of the campaign. Like, the ultra plan ahead.
I used to do that a lot with the original campaign I used to run, the first one.
No, I mean, everybody did. I mean, I did that for a bit with Shadows because it was one of the first campaigns that I DM'd. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, like, in terms of like the final way that we are getting into kind of towards the end here, you know, like we're getting to about where I expected to finish. But so I had this starting point, and I was like, I kind of want them to have this as an end. The way we got there was initially this. It became this. Yeah. Yeah. Now we're getting here, but there was about all of this type of routing in between.
Yeah, and then you actually went all the way far here and then back.
Yeah. One part of it went to the whiteboard.
Right. Oh man, prequels are fun. But yeah, there's so many things you have to keep track of with world building, and actually, there's in my recommendations, I would definitely look at this thing that is www.nownovel.com came out. I believe it's not mostly towards D&D campaigns itself, but
it's storytelling almost in general.
Exactly, and what's D&D if not storytelling with so many voices and just immense chaos? But it's a series of essentially just 8 questions that you should ask yourself if you want to start a world from scratch, like not derived from anything. Because one of the things about world building is that you can take aspects from the real world and put it in there. But that's for after this. The first question is essentially, where is the story located? A past or future Earth or elsewhere?
And so this is something that, depending, I think, on your level of comfortability in terms of being a DM, because a lot of people would obviously take that question and immediately be like, well, it's in the past, obviously, it's fantasy, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, easy, done. But then it's the thing is, you can take this game and really put it anywhere. It's like we had the example. We had one that is maybe in more of a slightly modern setting in 1929. And then we've had, obviously, our fantasy campaigns that we run on this channel. Mm-hmm. But you could go, I've seen plenty of other sci-fi campaigns and things that go to the future. Like, anything that, you know, anything is up to you. You can pick anytime you would like. It just maybe takes a little more effort.
Right, and some people do forget that future doesn't mean that they had all this technology and whatnot. Post-apocalyptic is still in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's like a regression back.
And even then, like, you can have points where it's like, you know, that's the thing. It's like you think of, you know, like what magic can do in the fantasy world. So, like, you know, there are settings like Eberron. Like, Eberron has like these lightning rails and, you know, crazily technological advancements.
The entire city's floating.
You can inherently put that. You know, if you think of that as now, well, it's just like, okay, well, essentially, you just put that same type of tech, but just put it into the frame of today. So instead of just having like sending stones and whatever, it's just the phones, you know, just like what we have. You know, you can totally change like certain things to make any time set work, which is really mind-boggling when you really get into it. But it can be easier than you think.
True. And plus, it doesn't even have to be Earth. Like, making maps is always fun to do, and making your own terrain is always fantastic. Taking inspiration from different other cultures in real life, because I know our friend John's actually planning a low magic campaign soon.
Yes, which he's a historian, so the fact despite the magic obviously introduced aspect to it, he does take a very realistic approach to how people act and react in the world, and behave.
Our friend John's pretty great because I constantly refer to him whenever I have a historical question, like, what would this people do if placed in this situation? But that's for later. Yes. Second question is, who are your world's main inhabitants? Are they mostly human, mostly mythical, or is it a mix? Most campaign settings are a mix in a way.
Relatively a mix. But again, you could always take either point. I've obviously people have experimented with the idea of like you are in a city where it is mostly run by elves, or you're in a country that's mostly run by elves, or dwarves or whatever. Like, so you could kind of set with that and be like, this is a dwarf campaign. So everybody generally is probably going to be a dwarf, and if you are something else, you're the outcast, you're the outlier.
True, which would be very interesting to see someone tackle that with humans being the outlier.
Yeah, I mean you don't think of that as a common thing, but those lands technically really have to exist.
True. If you think about it, Mass Effect, humans were the outliers there.
Exactly. Oh, that's a big function of that game, and that's obviously things to take in place as you look at a game like Mass Effect. It's kind of the whole point of almost the first game was the fact that it was humans dealing with the fact that they are now this outlier and like trying to get in because they feel like they should belong.
Yeah. So it's a concept that can work. And that's the beauty of homebrew. You can do whatever you want with this.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so many ways to portray a story that you want to give you, not necessarily the audience, because not everybody will want to do a show, but just to your players. Just something like, we're all pixies. We have to deal with being in the big man's world.
Right. No, you're right. I mean, there's so many cool things you can do. But let's see, we can move on to the third thing here, which is, what is your world's governing system? A monarchy? Nothing Earth's ever seen?
Oh man, this actually has a great section in the DMG, the Dungeon Master's Guide, that explains like each type of known, at the very least, known form of government. So you have autocracies, meritocracies, democracies, of course, communisms, the Reds.
Anyway.
But I do see that many people do default to the typical either council versus the empire, which isn't bad.
Yeah.
Tropes exist because they're mostly good if done right. But essentially, what makes the rules in your world is for the civilization? Because even if there is civilization, you can have it be no government at all, which
is kind of what the low magic setting we were discussing kind of has. Because I mean, when you look at a lot of medieval era, like truly medieval era like times, sure, lands existed and supposedly these governments existed, but there was barely any checking in anything. They couldn't just like show up and be like, there has been a disturbance in this village 12 miles down the way. Like, they'll never know until they like maybe one day send somebody, and then just so happens, because it's probably gonna be a tax collector too, they just have to so happen know like when something is going on. Otherwise, like, it's totally like just whatever.
Right. And people seem to forget too that the form of government also affects the lifestyle of everybody else. Because there's this great video on YouTube by, I believe his name is JP Gray. I might be wrong on the first two initials. But he explains the mindset of a ruler. And if you're in a democracy, it pays to have everybody well educated. So in a democracy, you have more schools, more hospitals, making sure the peoples who have the power are able to exercise it to the best, and then you can play off of what they're concerned about, so that you may gain power through that means, and by which you're just voted into it. If you're in a dictatorship, it pays to have people be ignorant of some things. So the lack of schools, the lack of hospitals, you're not focusing more on the populace, focusing on maintaining power, and that can play a lot into campaigns. It's a great
and
video.
That's the funny thing though, is you can, at that point, you can take those and you can see like, well, maybe like, let's see, how could maybe you could find a way to bend those.
Exactly.
It's a fantasy world. You can kind of play with the rules a little bit. For example, like, you can have an empire that maybe like it's just like, or like maybe it may be called an empire, but maybe it has like a, the leader is looked at very benevolently because of, the fact that they do support the society and they do try to keep them well, like, in well placed. And it's like, well, because like it creates this idea that like I give you so much, of everything. You have plenty of food, you have all of what you need.
Right.
If you get rid of me, it may go away. And all of a sudden, like, then there's that instilled idea of like a threat, but that might be just the people's idea. Like, people maybe came up with the idea that it's like, well, if you're so good, like, why do you let somebody tell you what to do? Well, because he hasn't told me to do anything I don't want. So I don't know. Like, yeah, I don't feel like it. Like, like you could do that. Like, that's something that you could just play with as a story motif, and maybe like. You could maybe go into different realms of like revolution or whatever, but like go into the mindset of like, especially the concept of, this, they don't hurt me, so I don't feel like I need to do anything, is very real and exists. And like will essentially let a lot of people, a lot of like governing bodies get away with a lot of stuff.
This topic's slowly turned political.
No, but I mean, that's the thing. It's like, it's crazy that how much that actually does affect your campaign.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, because like that's kind of what we're in Shadows right now. It's this almost governmental battle between, the Dalaran Republic and, the Empire.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, you look at something like Dalara, which has more of like a English style,
right,
like republic, where it's more of like they have a king.
Yeah.
And he does have some power, but not as much. He's kind of like a president. It's like a mix between the U.S. and England, where it's like you kind of think the king is semi-token, but he does have veto power.
I believe the term might be mono. I can't pronounce it with my Spanish.
That I don't know.
Yeah,
but
moving on. This actually.
You can go really deep in your campaign without realizing it, and it may be making a difference.
True,
story-wise.
Oh man, we're gonna open up a can of worms here too. The next question is: what social difference exists between people? Are some people more feared than others? And most people, for this question, the first thought is orcs.
Yeah, I mean, even the picture is
an orc.
Whoops. Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, you look at it here, like it's essentially an orcish man. You can see the green. It's out of focus. I realize it's not the most wide depth of field.
I was saying the image we'll put on the thing. But yeah, essentially, the prejudices of some worlds might not transfer over to the other. I'm playing with the concept of having a very feared race be commonplace.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I'm also playing with in a potential like future campaign setting that I would like to play one day. And that's kind of the thing that exists in it as well, is this idea that like this race fears the potential, like, I guess, conflict that exists with this other race, or, and what exists in Shadows right now is, in Dalara, especially in the higher cities where there are very high noble elves, like, and I've mentioned this has existed in the campaign now, where it is like they do not like half elves, and in a way they kind of look, they look down on humans a bit. But then there's a little bit of fear in other lands, like in Dern, like towards the dwarven people, because they're generally the nobility, and like they really kind of stop down everybody else except for humans a little bit. Yeah. But mostly like the other races, the other minority races, fear dwarves because they're kind of the ones keeping them down.
Mm-hmm. And I believe it's in the Eberron setting. And typically, halflings are very loved people. Like, yes. They're generally regarded with good faith. In Eberron, they're dinosaur riding cannibals. Yeah. It's hilarious, and I love it.
Yeah, you can play some weird, interesting stuff in terms of those relationships. Mm-hmm. And obviously, like we mentioned, that can go into a very deep can of worms.
Oh, yeah.
But it still has interest to it.
Mm. And this social difference might derive from like a certain event in history, which goes into our next point. Or the next question is, how have historical events, wars, dynasties shaped the world?
Let's go back to the 1920s campaign that we were referencing to. John, the historian, a very, very, very stickler for wanting this campaign to have as much historical accuracy as it possibly can. Mm-hmm. It's obviously not, because obviously based on its concept, it can't be the most, but it will have certain, accuracies. Like for example, the campaign takes place obviously relatively. It started technically, I think 28 or so.
Mm-hmm.
It's a few years, but it is still like relatively later, or that's still relatively close after World War One, and we're constantly kind of dealing with this potential, hiding tensions to create almost a World War II. And that's the thing. It's he's taking these actual historical events, and obviously they're the actual events in this campaign, but he's using history to a point to make it a story and a campaign exist.
Mm-hmm. And well, in a previous campaign I had, this affected. Not only does it affect the people itself, but like the land geography. Because in a previous campaign I had, which is based on the setting that I'm working on right now, there was this event called the Woe, where a bunch of undead started coming out. It was solved, but the resulting reparation efforts for that land that was affected was not enough for the current government that they had. So they allowed themselves to be annexed by surrounding city states, thus becoming a bigger country. And this bigger country later went on to do more and more things. So that's just to give you an example of what some events might be.
Yeah.
I know in Eberron, especially, they have the morning, which is all of a sudden the middle of their continent just blows up. And they're like, what the hell happened?
Who hit the button?
Exactly. And they're like, you know what? We're gonna stop this war we've had.
We're gonna figure this out.
Yeah. It's like, we don't know what happened there, and we kinda don't want it to happen again. But which could have been some sort of nuclear bomb and whatnot. Which then goes to our next question. How does your world compare technology to our own? And we kind of delved into this earlier.
Yes, and again, we did back. And that's the thing. It's like, you will see this a lot. I think the more and more these books start to come out, because like the longer and longer an edition for D&D is out, the more, obviously more modernization kind of gets inserted into the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's obviously just because you can only go to so many inspirations without including parts of your world, where in our world we are not in a fantasy or like medieval like setting. We're kind of now, and it's interesting to think though, kind of almost building into that steampunk realm, because that's why obviously that exists.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, like I mean, a number of items in the normal game already pretty much exist. There are things like sending stones, and like there is kind of almost this ability to communicate. Well, like maybe you add something that affects that. Like maybe you do add an extra thing that is almost like an earpiece.
There's actually fun fact to you, because I'm not sure if you know this.
Mm-hmm.
There's a 6-shot revolver in Dungeon of the Mad Mage. You just gotta find it.
Yes, I am aware, and I was. Because obviously, like, Revolver had existed in the DMG, but they never really had an interesting one. Mm-hmm. But that's the thing. Like, if you want to have like things like guns in your campaign, go ahead.
Oh yeah.
Matthew Mercer made the Gunslinger class, which is always helpful. Otherwise, there was the Gunslinger Artificer in UA, which we at one point we kind of did a modification of, because the Thunder Cannon itself is kind of more like a rifle in the Artificer.
Yes.
But again, you go into homebrew. This is about homebrew. Uh-huh. I wanted him to kind of be like a little bit more of like the gunslinger, though, with like a revolver. Not really like a sniper guy, or like, here's my big boomstick. It was just like,
no, his friend was like that.
Yeah, he was more about like kind of the finesse of the handgun. The idea also obviously being that he was, his family was a mob. Right. So
I want to be a cowboy.
Hitman.
Yeah, so we modified the Thunder Cannon to be a 2-shot pistol.
Yeah, so pretty much a revolver, which existed. There, we looked up and we found a 2-shot revolver that existed, and it worked for this. It worked to work in the rules.
Yeah, it's just that your dice never cooperated.
No, they don't. Homebrew should not make. They can, but inherently, homebrew does not make your dice do better.
Oh.
But hey man, what I would hit
Oh,
I
yeah.
hit good.
Oh, yeah. And then the next question is, we already talked about this too, is what's the people's standards of living?
Obviously, they very much can go into wares and whatnot,
Pretty much.
or time settings, like things like that.
You're going to have the stereotypical
Events.
things, like you have classes like nobility, the middle class, and then the poor,
Yeah.
who shouldn't be there.
How do they? Yeah. Well, and how do they? How do they interact with each other? You know?
Exactly. If it's a more benevolent nobility, play with that idea. Just like, these people need our help, we should do something, and then
Yeah.
have the bad guy be the one asshole's like, nah, man, it's my money, I need it now.
Oh God. It's the evil. It's the great and evil, powerful being, J.G. Wentworth. No. But anyway.
And then you can have
Yeah.
communities too. Just
Right. Exactly.
yeah, it's just how do these people live? Like, are they educated? Are there schools? Is it mostly are the schools run by churches? It's questions for later.
A good example to bring up is obviously we'll go back to Shadows because it's
Yeah.
our show and everything. You know, we went from when they were in a port city in Dern that it was in total shutdown. You know, because of the way the whole government is and everything.
Yeah.
You know, because it was in complete shutdown. Like, there is people on the street. The carts are not, like, you know, the vendors around really aren't the most fancy. You know, they were like, oh, does anybody have any magical items? Like, I had to have that moment where I was just like, you live in a land where it is illegal to be a mage, and you are asking if they have magical weapons. Like, who's going to enchant them? And that was kind of like, that was a moment where it was like, you know, you had to create this like status, like, wow, we are in kind of not the greatest place.
That's
and then
true.
they went, and then everybody has now been in Delara, which now they're there. There's this big university with like all these magic everywhere, you know, these really fancy buildings and stores with cool, you know, magical items in them.
We're here like, do you have a +1 shield? Like, we have 50. Which one do you want?
The only thing I don't have a lot of is this Frost brand. Like,
I've got like 2.
takes a while to make them, so
Yeah.
you know, I gotta have the time. Like, you go somewhere in Durham, it's like, do you have a Frost brand? Like,
The hell is that?
do I have a what? Are you asking me if I have an STD?
Guards.
Like, you know, like that's all about, you know, the standards of living,
Right.
And that really all plays a huge factor into what you can buy as for your
True.
characters. Or
Yeah.
like,
Also, but it also opens up the possibility. I'm just gonna go into this quick tangent about a black network, which is something
Right.
like an underground network for this stuff, because there
Yeah.
would be some stuff. Think about it. Criminals make money off of this, and if they get a chance to charge something in necessity, and charge just 5 times the usual amount, they would do it.
oh yeah.
Just people
Absolutely.
need it. Yeah.
So yes, and then finally the last one, which might be the one that doesn't need a whole lot, but
It's been
has its possibility,
That's true.
which is number 8. Does magic exist? How is it regulated, and who practices it? I think the second part of that question is obviously the most important. Most of the time in D&D, you are going to have it at least exist.
Yes. Typically, because
You could run a no magic campaign, but that obviously limits players and what they can do. It definitely, I think it would be one that you would really have to have everyone on board to play on.
Oh yeah, and then you have instances of high magic campaigns where everybody typically knows like a spell or two.
They got, you know, things like uncommon items. They're pretty much common now. Like,
Pretty
you know,
much.
you could go even to that level. I did that in a Dimension Crisis. I actually reduced the cost to every item that existed to essentially its tier below.
Mm-hmm.
Normal, common, non-magical items, pence. Things like uncommon were just common, you know. So that's why they were able to buy like stuff that you normally wouldn't, but it was because like there's this crazy high magic
True.
concept.
And a concept I really want to see someone tackle is, whoa, excuse me. Like, you always have elves practicing magic, and that's fine and all, because elves are elves and they are highly sexualized in today's media. But you don't see a bugbear practicing magic, and I want to see that, a bugbear practicing magic.
Yeah, I mean that's of something you don't see a lot of things like that. You know, a lot of people obviously have their stereotypes. But,
oh yeah.
You know, like I've definitely wanted to play like certain slightly uncommon, like A lot of people look at the Warforged. It's just like it is a tree that's been made into a fighter.
Yep.
It's like no,
he has a soul. Damn it.
and he can cast magic.
True.
Warforged can be wizards.
Mm-hmm. And they can kill you in campaigns.
Yes, as can anyone else.
Yes.
But so that is at least the list there.
Yeah, for world building. But there's so many other things you can think about that.
And each of those, we could go into so many things.
But we're gonna leave world building alone for a little bit.
And all that's really good for being a DM. You know, because like being a DM, you gotta kind of think about all that stuff anyway, and especially when you're doing an adventure, you don't have to think about that as much. But there's a lot to keep track of.
Oh yeah.
But even then, sometimes, even as a DM, you want to be that one class that just doesn't exist. You want to be that race that you've had this idea for. Your OC, do not steal. Finally, you can play them in your Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, and this edition has made it easier than ever.
Oh yeah, you want to be a Super Saiyan Keyblade Master? There's races.
Do you want to make a Keyblade in this game? You can do that too.
Oh man, I only said Keyblade because that's the first thing that came to mind.
It's relevant.
I've been playing Kingdom Hearts 3 so much more than.
But that's the thing but you honestly that raises a solid point.
Yeah.
Which is that like if people, especially many of us in the gaming sphere, obviously play both video games and these games, they inspire us. They make us want to play that in like ourselves. Well, those games like Kingdom Hearts, there's not a Kingdom Hearts RPG out there. There's not a Kingdom Hearts MMO or whatever where you can create your own Keyblade Warrior. Not yet.
I mean, there's a mobile game, but it's a mobile game.
Yeah, and that most of the time those, it's not the same. You don't get you don't get the same control. Whereas like all of a sudden, but you in D&D, like you can devise a way to become a Keyblade Master, create the class. Like the DMG does give you some ways and to learn and kind of what you should just keep in track of. And then there are even more in-depth guides out there in terms of what do the real classes do, how to apply what the real classes do to yours. A great example that both of us have worked on is our class, which is called the Duelist.
Hey.
Sadly, it did not make it into Shadows of an Empire, but it did make it into Dimension Crisis.
Oh yeah. I believe myself and Dylan played characters with
you. Each played both of the subclasses.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah, like let's kind of use that in order to kind of talk about what it's like to make a player option in terms of creating player options in terms of homebrew.
Oh yeah,
because it's a lot.
Oh yeah.
Now, if you don't wish to make it, and you wish to find stuff, I think before we get into the nitty gritty of how we made the Duelist,
true.
Where can we find these things?
Well, there's several websites that you can easily go to.
I don't want to make a Keyblade Master. I want to find one.
Exactly, and I'm sure there is one. Some of them we constantly plug them on our show.
There is one.
Yeah. D&D Beyond has a great homebrew section.
Yes. There is a small asterisk. It's only smaller compared to another one we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But D&D Beyond, it does have a very collective amount of homebrew.
Oh yeah, because people want to play their homebrew classes on there. The bad
subclasses.
Yeah, I won't say it's bad, but the restricting thing about D&D Beyond is that you can't put a full class on there.
No, and it is. I would say it's slightly a downside because it would be nice, because they put in the Blood Hunter. You would think that there is somewhat this setup to be able to import in your own class. It's a lot of work, but I think it's mainly because of all of the nitty gritty of like adding the tables and all of this, all the correct areas.
Oh yeah,
it's probably tough to program in. So, but I feel like I'm just saying that the way is there. They just need to find a way. I think they're probably just finding a way to make it user friendly.
Yep.
Instead of just being code.
Oh man, because it will take on there as things are now, it would take forever to make a class.
However, if you do like code, as anything about code,
you can go to the home brewery.
It is made by Natural Crit. I think is the base website.
Very similar to our channel, but it's not the same, gentlemen.
We're Natural
ladies.
One.
Yes,
It's the end. We're the other end.
Yeah.
We're the failures.
Yeah, we're the asshole to this burial metaphor that I've lost.
Nice.
But in the home brewery, if you got a decent knowledge of HTML, or not even that, if you know how to pick things up really fast, home brewery allows you to make a stat block or even a spell list or a class page.
You could like create like everything that like you can make it look like it came straight out of a book.
Oh yeah.
In that setup.
I've already dealt with it. I'm using it right now for my campaign, the one I'm running right now, and it's very helpful for keeping things organized.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes a little bit to make the things, but it's worth it because it looks so good at the end.
Well, that and there's obviously, like we mentioned, there's a little bit of that background knowledge that kind of needs to be there. But the similar to D&D Beyond, because the benefit to D&D Beyond that has, because it's very easy to upload onto D&D Beyond. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can as long as you fit the base requirements and how the class or whatever item, race, anything gets put into it, then it will be published onto D&D Beyond.
Yes,
but the downside is obviously that means a bunch of OP stuff can be put on there. But the check is that you can kind of easily see if a lot of people are adding it, if a lot of people view this, if there are any comments. The one thing that does exist that is easy to put stuff on and is also relatively, but however, I guess you should say not but is relatively less, I guess you could say double check, you know, is D&D Wiki.
Oh yeah, that there's the D&D Wiki has a lot of options. I believe it was 2,000 something for just races alone.
Yeah, there are so people have uploaded like a bunch of stuff. Somebody essentially uploaded a Yu-Gi-Oh class to make you like the king of games.
Here's my trap card, ladies. But the downside is that they can put anything on there, and you won't be able to.
And it's very hard to see, like, there are comments, but since there's no like when you hit it, like, oh, this has been downvoted or whatever. Like most of the time when you find D&D Wiki stuff, like most of the time you find it, it's because you search like Black Mage. D&D 5e, and you just hit search because you want, and like a D&D Wiki one will pop up and it's like, ooh,
that's not what I had in mind.
That seems a little strong.
Yeah, suddenly it makes sense why teachers don't want you to use Wikipedia for your papers.
But that's why you gotta look at the sources.
True.
You gotta use your brain in order to determine whether or not this is valuable.
Okay, we're gonna set that aside for real quick to say, do you want to make money doing what you love? And I say set this aside, but it actually ties everything in, because the next website that we can mention it's a great one because you can actually make money off of this.
And not only that, Wizards of the Coast will publish their stuff on this website as well.
Holy crap! If you play Adventures League, you already know about this. The DMs Guild. I was about to say something else completely.
I don't know what.
I don't know either. I just knew I wasn't going to say the right thing. But the DMs Guild.
Yes.
It's a great place to find more homebrew options. But in this one, there are some options where you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of free material that you can,
or pay what you want. Even,
exactly.
You know, if you want to throw, like, if you like, there are some there's like very consistent creators on the DMs Guild, but they will set their stuff to pay what you want because they just do it for fun. But what's nice is it gives you that ability to just, if you like a creators, they make a lot of stuff you like, just throw them a tip.
Right.
And
typically on there, it's where you find the more like in-depth and longer, or the more material in homebrew, because there you have these 60-page PDFs of what this class does or these multiple classes. You can get bundles and such. It's really great for people who want to get into stuff and are okay with spending $1 here and there.
Yeah.
And if you ever make your stuff, you can put it on there and then make $1 or $2 of your own.
Yes, I am still, in a way, I will at some point be working on getting the Duelist stuff onto it. The main thing is just we need an artist, and artists cost money.
Oh, yeah.
The Duelist itself is pretty much done in terms of as a class. There are things I'll just have to change at some point in the future here. But once those changes go in, I'll be pretty comfortable with where it is and just let it go. But again, artists cost money.
Oh,
We like to pay artists. We
Yeah.
don't think that you can just not pay them.
Yeah, no. Exposure is not paying.
What they do is hard. What they do is very hard.
Yeah, if we could draw, we would draw, but
I can't. I'm bad.
I'm 7 years out of practice.
But now we go. Oh, well, there was one more website.
Well, yes and no, because it's the same premise as DM Skill, but DM Skill is kind of an affiliate of it, so they both work in the same thing. But
right.
this-
It's good to mention.
Yes, this website also has some individual pages that DM Skill might not, and it's Drive Through RPG. They have a more broader sense of materials you can go on there, because while DM Skill primarily focuses on D&D, Drive Through RPG might have some Pathfinder stuff, might have some Starfinder stuff,
Yeah.
and all that fun jazz. So it's a good thing if you want to get references, because it's the same process. It's pay what you want, or get it free, or pay a certain amount to get something.
And a cool shout out to a group. They're kind of not the same type of hub as the ones we've mentioned.
Yes.
They're a specific homebrewing group that like make their homebrews and like for people to use, and that's the Middle Finger of Vecna group, which is a great name.
Their name always gets me.
But they make a really amazing stuff. Like they're very good at having relatively good balanced stuff. Like they have this PDF called Feats of the Fearsome, which is really good. It creates really interesting options that exist. Otherwise, they're essentially in the progress of alpha testing their an entire campaign setting, essentially, which is makes it D&D into sci-fi,
Right.
which is really crazy read. They've got a bunch of cool stuff. They got a witch class that's pretty nice.
I do enjoy their coffee domain for Clarice.
Well, and they have free stuff, which is nice. So some stuff you pay for, but some stuff is for free, which is nice. Like the witch class itself is free, but then you could get complete witch, which is not only the witch class, but a bunch of other stuff, and that you pay for.
Oh, yeah.
It's not crazy expensive, though, either, which is the nice part. But finally,
Yes.
we will get into the meat and grind. So now you want to make something. Now, an item is probably the easiest thing to start with,
I would say so, yeah.
because you're just obviously generally taking something that may exist and adding some extra properties to it.
Right.
Otherwise, if say you want to make a sword whip, like you want to be Ivy from Soul Calibur, you know,
Shout out to Ivy and Soul Calibur.
you know, like so then just take the concept of like the whip that exists,
Yep.
the short sword, or maybe the long sword. Probably the short sword would be better in terms of how Ivy's works, if we're just going with Ivy as an example.
True. Yeah. Yeah.
Then so then you just you figure out what the properties are, you find the ones that are the same. So they both are finesse. They're both the whip is not a light weapon.
No, the sword is though.
Yes. So then you kind of find out, all right, now they're the differences. So they have a different damage dice. They have a different damage dice. They have a different, like, one is reach. The whip has reach to it.
Yep.
The short sword obviously does not, but it's a light weapon.
True.
So you take certain things. So maybe by having to modify this, in its short sword form, it is no longer light, but it does gain a reach because of the whip.
True.
And maybe it still maintains a certain amount of damage, or maybe it has different damages based on what form it's in.
True.
And then you have to think about, okay, well, what does it take to switch those things? You know,
True.
is it an action? Is it a bonus action?
Yeah.
You just kind of have to consistently, like, once you figure out the base parts, then you have to think of how it works in the game.
Essentially, yeah. If you're out there and you're planning to make a magical item, please make something for fists, because that's always great.
There's a lack.
Yeah, there is a lack. The only magical, like official magical.
They used to
item
have
you get-
hand wraps, which was a thing, but and I've added it a couple times.
I might add some to my campaign too.
Yeah, monks, because they get magical fists inherently, you know, they lose out.
Right. Just give them like the thing from
Sure,
Way
their
of the
fists
Dragon.
are magical, but what if they want to have their fists also do lightning damage?
Right.
Or
slashing
tase
damage.
fist.
Yeah.
Here's my tase fist. Yeah, no. And so you can I would say, like, if you've never homebrewed before, start with items.
Yeah. Get a
you
feel
know,
for it.
Yeah. That, and then maybe you can bump up to, like, spells. You know, like add a spell to the game. Think of what is a wizard missing, you know, and then maybe like go from there.
Hit points.
They have false life. But no, like that is the thing. So think about like what maybe a spell is almost something interesting, but maybe like you like something else. Matthew Mercer made kind of a modification to the Druid craft, but he made the Decompose cantrip, which so it like, you know, Druid craft can like create flowers off of something, so you know, like you can go to the ground and create flowers from the ground. Well, he made it so that you can take a body and immediately like essentially return it to the earth. You know, you just decompose it into the ground and be able to have grass kind of grow from where it is.
Right.
And, you know, that's something that you can kind of work with. And that'll start to teach you then really, especially weapon and spell, will teach you how kind of to balance, especially spell. Spells can get real OP.
Yes, it can.
And you'll find out fast.
Yeah, there's a difference between 46 damage and 4d6 damage.
Yes. But that, so yeah, like those are really good ways to learn because they're good feedback, immediate feedback to tell. Like it takes much less testing to figure out if those are broken. Whereas then when you get to something like a race or classes, it starts to get slightly more complicated.
Yeah, you just have to.
Now, race is very good with D&D Beyond because you can kind of see, you can have like a base, like you can base your class off of, or your race off of the orc.
Yes.
So you can see what they do to make the orc work and then be like, okay. And then maybe when you decide to go from scratch, you can kind of cross-reference, like, how did they build that? Oh, they did that. Oh, okay. Maybe I could do something like that. And you can kind of start to, but...
Basically last night for me the entire time.
But then testing it is obviously a little bit more because certain things maybe you only really find out how strong they are in the long run. Maybe some things are too weak in the long run.
That's true.
But maybe that's how it should be. It's very dependent on how you feel about it, but then how you feel when you test it.
Oh, yeah. One good example would be the Duelist.
For now going to class, yeah.
Yeah. For going to class, I believe we had some troubles with one of our abilities. I forget which one it was.
The main one we were having a lot of trouble with was I'm trying to remember the name because it was essentially the balance between an ability called Apocatastasis and essentially trying to find the ability in terms of imbuing spells into your sword or into your weapon.
Yes.
And that was the big thing, was kind of like, how do we work this? And kind of one reason that we really kind of were trying to work with that was the fact that it felt like we essentially had an early level version and then one that happened later. And my initial concept was that the class as a whole would have this ability to almost imbue specific cantrips into their weapon.
Yes.
But we were kind of like, your point was that, well, it feels like that kind of bleeds. It makes one of the subclasses, the Soul Reaver, it makes it less unique.
Yes.
Whereas then this other one, it's like, why do they really need to worry about putting the spell into their weapon if they're just going to be, if their focus is that they can cast spells faster?
Yes.
And do more cantrips. So that was kind of some of the things that and especially with classes, like if you're trying to make a full class, like there's a lot of balance that has to go in between those two. But you start with the base idea. So my idea was I wanted to essentially combine the Red Wizard from Final Fantasy, but then also combine kind of the Duskblade / Magus that existed in both 3.5 and Pathfinder respectively.
Right.
I kind of liked the idea of that like combo because I always felt like that was semi a basis of what the Red Mage did. But I just wanted to take it like that extra step further. So we went through a long, arduous process to kind of play with what can work with the Duelist.
Even with Soul Reaver, if I remember correctly, that's the one where if you attack a certain type of creature,
yes, you gain a certain spell within the blade.
Yeah, we were just having some trouble picking out the spells.
Yeah, because the idea was it was going to be based on the type of enemy, the type of creature that you hit. So like if you hit an undead, you would get a certain ability. If you hit an ooze, you would get a certain ability. Which at the moment, I do plan on changing it, but at the moment, like ooze, if you hit an ooze, you get inflict wounds.
Right.
Which to me made sense because the idea was like when you hit an ooze or like if you touch an ooze, it hurts you.
Oh yeah.
They're generally acidic. So the idea is that like when you hit something else, then it hurts more. That was kind of the concept, but I did inevitably come up with but I had beasts with like acid spray or some type of acidic like attack.
I think so.
And I was like, I was like, you know what? It would make more sense if they were swapped. So they will be swapping at some point. I just haven't implemented it yet.
I think we also had a fire spell for devils.
Yeah, well, so the idea was obviously, well, that's the thing is like acid damage doesn't inherently do much for oozes either. The idea was that like you're taking the essence. Well, the essence of a devil is somewhat inflamed.
True.
You know, and that was kind of why like, okay, well then that's what it should probably give. But obviously you're going to keep fighting that devil. So you're not going to, what are you going to do? You're going to hit it with something that it's resistant to? That doesn't make sense.
Right.
So I think the idea we eventually went to was like, maybe you pull out somewhat something that it could be weak to.
Yes.
So then we chose other things. Although Crown of Madness, I think was what we put for devils.
Yes. Cause that would also make sense.
Yeah.
Although I would argue now,
I think it's because I think the spells that you have in your blade can also just be casted from your blade. You don't have to hit them.
Yeah.
I think it's the only ability that you have to hit a creature with in order to cast that spell, if it's in your blade for Duelist, was the cantrip ability that you can put like Chill Touch into your sword and then hit someone. You know, so then you do weapon damage and Chill Touch.
Finally making it into touch a weapon.
Yeah, it was limited. You could not just be like, go. You know, you had, but with the Soul Reaver ability to be able to take the essence from a creature, Essence Reaver, as it was called.
There we go.
That was the ability name. But the way that they would do that was then like they now can cast this spell.
Yeah.
So that was why we put Crown of Madness, because we're like, okay, well we'll make it so that it's not the same rule. So now that it can be casted, we'll now have having Crown of Madness makes sense.
Yes.
But so does other spells. Like I remember the beast one I had was Mal's Acid Arrow, and it was because like sure you could hit someone and use it on them, why not? But then the idea was, well, you could do go and. Sure, like if you're fighting an ooze, is Mal's Acid Arrow going to help you the most? Probably not, but most of the time you're not. In the scenarios that you're just fighting ooze, I think that's the less of your concerns. Because most of the time it's either going to be an Oblex or a Gelatinous Cube.
Right.
In which case, the way you hack and slash it leads to problems anyway. I think, again, the fact that you have Mal's Acid Arrow is going to be less of a problem. Whereas at least if you're fighting ooze and other creatures, then you can just be like, go. Ha!
Pretty much. I remember trying to find a mimic with my bare hands, and that went out really well.
Yes. Well, that was not with the Duelist.
No.
But yeah, no. So we did there was a lot of trial and error with the Duelist. Doing stuff in Dimension Crisis was really nice. Was like really, really nice for trying to figure out like what works, you know, and like what kind of was going to run into problems. So like being able to kind of work that is really helpful.
Yes.
But we are I'd say we were, in terms of like whatever types of testing I've been able to do, I'm pretty comfortable once I make the changes that need to be made right now, with, you know, having it be put out there. But, you know, again, that's almost a year ago that we started the process now. Right. At this point, like, so, you know, like, there's no slouching when it comes to making a class. Very much even some class, especially in something like D&D Beyond, because they allow you to make it, maybe can be a little bit easier because you're going based off of a class part that already exists.
Yes.
So you can be maybe a little more loose with some things, but many of those things always will require some type of trial and error. Like I've played some relatively broken classes, but subclasses even before. Like we found a Dragoon subclass. Yes, there's the Dragoon that exists out there, but we're talking about Final Fantasy style.
Ooh.
And the way that they made the jump ability essentially lets you like do the Dragoon jump, but like every turn. The way it works in a Final Fantasy game is like jump, next turn, land, jump, next turn, land. You know, like you have that delay. There was no delay. It was awesome.
Yeah.
But it was also kind of broken. Because it was part of the fighter then. So then you add all the fighter stuff that you can put in there. It was like, oh my God.
Well,
she was a force to be reckoned with.
Well, now that we're getting closer and closer to the end of the podcast, at least for today, let's harken back to John's campaign, because I want to say the best mismatch of homebrew is in that campaign, at least for us.
So we've referenced it obviously a number of times. So we talked about it a lot in the storytelling part with the DM homebrew aspect.
Oh yeah, and this part is just to give you some ideas too of what you can do.
So yeah, and that's the thing. So again, one of the things that he's done really well with is just incorporate this idea of, you know, what would exist if you took, like, say you took Eberron.
Yep.
Right? Eberron exists.
Yep.
It's there.
Yep.
So you took that and you just let it continue to move forward in time all the way to the year 1926.
Marshall?
Yeah.
What character are you playing in that campaign?
So if you would like some nice context, I am playing a halfling Star Guardian, who currently holds the armor, spear, and shield of Persephone, otherwise known as Athena in terms of Grecian. At one point had Neptune instilled in my soul. He gave me those once he freed himself.
Yeah,
it was a gift for bringing him kind of back from the dead. Because in the world, all of the gods got nuked. So a lot of the old gods kind of are gonzo. And I'm essentially, in terms of what a Star Guardian is, I'm essentially a Sailor Moon character. Sailor Moon Jupiter. Because, you know, the best Sailor Girl.
I'll fight you. But I have no. Yeah.
But yes. No. So that sounded ridiculous.
Yeah, but that's homebrew.
Because it is.
It's great. And I'm playing her. Did we decide twin, older sister? I think it was twin, right?
Yes, we were twins.
Yeah, her twin sister, Juniper, now named, who is a channeler, which is basically a stand user from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Yeah, well, so the basis of the channeler was they kind of have this, like, it's almost like they have this inner power that they can kind of, because I had to look at it for potentially a class, and that came in when I started it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's essentially like you have like a being or like spirit or whatever within you. It depends on your subclass.
Yeah, it's a manifestation of your spirit.
Right. And there were kind of other things that also could exist. Like he had me look at being a channeler, but instead of it being the spirit, it was actually Neptune.
Yeah.
that was it. But he took it, but the one he has very much makes him like a JoJo character.
Pretty much. Along with the fact
that poses everywhere.
Along with the fact that Juniper also is a clown of Vecna, because in that world, Vecna runs a circus.
Yes, he does.
And
however, your connection to Vecna has somewhat been severed now.
Oh yeah,
in that world,
thanks to a Deck of Many Things drawing, because we also have a Deck of Many Things.
Yes.
But yeah, Clown of Vecna, and
ooh,
that was
like
me.
That. Yeah, I didn't like that.
Didn't like that.
It's probably a quartz.
That's true. But yeah. Technical difficulties here, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, basically Clown Vecna, and I had these thing called Clown Powers, which is derived from the Clown class. But to show you how broken it is, there's the potential of me attacking 6 times in a turn, and then doing another ability that will stop time and allow me another turn, and then doing 6 more attacks.
Yeah, no, I mean, so John's campaign is essentially the example of like just the possibility that you can go just completely insane, right? Like somebody, and John is a very experienced DM. The reason he is able to do this, especially at almost the historical accuracy, is because he is very good at knowing the game and knowing balance really well.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there is a lot of things that are unbalanced, and he's aware of that, but he counters this with his own unbalancedness, like a witch that can essentially stare at you and immediately disintegrate you.
What happened to you yesterday?
Yeah, but luckily I got a clone on the way, so I'm good.
True, yeah.
I just get at least a week where I can play a temp character, which is good timing.
Also, one of the party members is a cartoon.
Well, their Patreon is the aspect of it is the toon.
Oh, okay. So
She is not herself a cartoon.
got it.
She's able to make herself a cartoon.
Well, our past party members included a Pokemon trainer,
Well, she was a witch. She's also happened to have the abilities of a Pokemon.
True. Also a female dinosaur woman who cooked and also owned a mech.
Yeah, just it's just so happened.
Yeah, just random stuff.
That mech was really useful.
Yeah.
So that'll end us on how homebrew works. Once we get into mechs, that's when we gotta call it.
Yeah. Once we start infringing on Titanfall's IP, we need to leave it at that.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
But yes, so that'll do it for this episode. We hope you guys enjoyed this little discussion about homebrew. If you want to see things like our Duelist class, I'll actually leave a link to our Duelist Drive folder if you would like to play the current beta version that exists. The final version will hopefully be out sooner than later. Mainly it'll come out if I get a nice fat check that I can hire an artist to do some work for.
But if there's any, as always for the podcast, if there's anything you guys want us to talk about, please let us know in the comments below, or shoot us a tasteful DM here and there. I believe Instagram is still a good place to look up things.
Yeah, so you can always, if you ever have any suggestions or want to hit us up for anything, you can always message us on Instagram. Which is also, again, in the link to the description below.
Oh, yeah.
And otherwise, that'll do it for us. Make sure you check out our shows. It's like Shadows of an Empire every Wednesday. And we just did a big lore drop last podcast, if you missed that.
And we also have a couple things in the near future.
Yes, we have more on the way. Do not miss out.
But if you do, that's okay. We still love you.
Not really. Just kidding. Just kidding. All right. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time, Adventure.
All right.